In this video, we will investigate scripting in a story to modify, evaluate, and control a data action. In this video, you will learn how to extract details from input controls, replace a data action trigger with a script object, modify the parameters of a data object, use the console log to check inputs and outputs, and then execute a data action with the scripting. This story has 2 pages. The first shows the actual expenses for all recorded years. The second shows a planning table for 2024. The second page has a data action trigger. This has 3 parameters. It has a fixed source for actual data, and a fixed target for the planning data, and a date parameter. The date parameter is controlled by an input control with all the active years listed. Note, only one year can be selected. When the data action is run, expenses for the selected year are copied from actual and aggregated to planning for January 2024. Then the average is copied for every month of 2024. What the end user wants is to get an average month for a selection of years. Multiple selected dates can be achieved by editing the input control to allow multiple selections. Now when the data action is run, multiple years are aggregated into 2024. This number looks too high. Revert the data and then save the story. Let's look at the data action. In the data action, we can see 3 steps. The first copies the expenses from the expenses at the selected dates in actual, and then aggregates into January 2024 of planning. The next step is getting that result and dividing it by 12 to get the average for a month. This is now incorrect if more than one month is selected. We need to also divide this result by the number of years selected. First, we will create a parameter for this value. Select the Show Parameter list. Click Create Parameter. Give it a suitable ID. In this instance, we will name it Years Selected. Under Parameter Type, select Number. Set the default number to 0. Click Done. Now select the second step. At the end of the third line, type divide and then the percentage sign. Your parameter for years selected will be shown as available. Select it and then click Save. Go back to the story. Select the data action trigger and open the Builder panel. Your parameter for years selected should be listed as a prompt. Now, if the data action is run, a prompt for the number of years lets the end user correct the average. Stories now have an advanced option. That lets them use the scripts in a similar way to analytic applications. Make certain Advanced option is turned on. Select the Outline tab on the right side panel. Click on the plus sign next to Scripting. Select Data Actions. This will add a data action object to the story. Select the More option next to the data action and rename it to reflect the data action that will be used. In this instance, we will call it DA_average expense. To the right, the data action configuration panel will open. Under data action, select the data action you are modifying. Below, all parameters are shown. For the target parameter, select Planning. For the source parameter, select Actual. For dates, change the link drop-down to Member Selection. Under the Number of Year parameter, select Custom Value. Click Done. Next, we want the data action trigger to utilize the data action object instead of using its own settings. Right-click on the data action trigger. Select Edit Script. This will open the script for an event that happens before the data action is activated. This has a return Boolean value, which determines if the trigger is active or not. This action can be turned off by returning a false value. Type return false. Remember that a line of code is ended with a semicolon. Save the story. Now, if the story is run in view mode, when the data action trigger is run, nothing happens. Note, the data action will still run in edit mode. Go back to the script for the data action trigger. First, we need to recreate the busy state in the script. Add a line above the return line. On this line, type application and then a dot. Press Ctrl Space to show application options. Select Show Busy Indicator. In the parentheses, type Applying Data Action Filters in quotes. Add a line below and hide the busy indicator with application.hide busy indicator. All the new script will be between these two application lines. Next, we need to collect all the selections made by the data input control. First, declare the variable iSelection. Type var iSelection equals, then the ID of your input control, then a dot. Use Control Space and then select Get Input Control Data Source and then another dot. Then type Get Active Selective Members. Save the story. The console log is a browser tool that can show real-time information about your script. We need to know what data iSelection contains. Type console, then a dot, and then press Control Space to add the log with parentheses. In these parentheses, type iSelection. Save the story and then open the view mode. Select F12 on your keyboard to open the tools. Select the Console tab. Run the data action trigger. In the console log, expand the array of data. Inspecting this data will show that not only are all the years being selected, but also the quarters and months. Copy the ID for one of the selected years. Go back to the script for the data action trigger. On a new line, type 2/. This creates a comment line. Paste the ID onto that line. Add a new line, and here we'll declare two integer variables, I equals 0 and U equals 0. Next, we will add a variable to hold a list of all the IDs for the selected years. Type var selected years equals, and then in square brackets type 2 quotes. This denotes an array of strings. Now we need to go through each selection in iSelections and add only the year IDs into the selected year array. Type 4 with some parentheses. In the parentheses, type I equals 0 semicolon. This sets I to 0. Then I less than iSelection dot length semicolon. This will stop the loop when it reaches the end of the array selected years. Then type I++. This increases I by 1 in each loop. Add curly brackets. In between the curly brackets, add a line, then type an if statement. In the parentheses, type iSelection, then square brackets set to I. Then a dot, followed by ID. Add another dot and press Ctrl space. Select index of. In the parentheses, type year in uppercase and in quotes. Type the greater than sign, then 0. Index of will return the position of a phrase in a string. If it cannot find it, it will return -1. We are using year as this is only in the IDs when the selection is a year. Add curly brackets. In between the curly brackets, add a line, then type selected years, then square brackets set to U equals iSelection, then square brackets set to I. Then a dot, then ID. Add a line to increase U by 1. Type U++ semicolon. Next, we will update the parameters for the data action object. On a new line after the for statement, type the ID for the data action object, then a dot. Press Ctrl space to see the options. Select Set Parameter Value. In the parentheses, type, in quotes, the ID for the dates parameter, then a comma, then the variable selected years. On a new line, set the parameter for the number of years. The value of this should be the length of the array for selected years. Next, let's change the busy indicator message. On a new line, type application.showBusyIndicator. In the parentheses, add the message running data action in quotes. Add another line. Here we can execute the data action. Type the ID of the data action object, then a dot, then press Ctrl space. There are two execute options, one that runs in the background. This is best if you have a long data action and you want the end user to do other actions within the story while they wait. We won't be using this action, we will use the execute action. This expects the end user to wait for it to finish. Once the data action has been run, then the data on a table must be refreshed. On a new line, type the ID of the planning table, then a dot. Use Control Space to see the options. Select Get Data Source, then add another dot. Use Control Space to add the function Refresh Data. Save the story. Open View Mode. Select some data in the input control, and then run the data action. Try this with different combinations of data. Remember to revert the data once you have finished. In this video, you learned how to extract details from input controls, replace a data action trigger with a script object, modify the parameters of a data object, and use the console log to check inputs and outputs. Finally, you learned how to execute the data action with scripting. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this tutorial, click the like button below. You can also view our growing catalogue of self-paced courses, tutorials, webinars, and join the community forum by creating your free account at analysisprime.com.